Welcome back to another episode of Bossy, Brilliant, and Badass. I'm Lisa Lindsay here with my high-achieving co-host, Liz Grade. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Lisa. Oh my gosh. This episode was so much fun, so informative, so many
I
good
know.
laughs. Yeah.
I know. And our conversation after, I wish we had recorded that, but that piece was a little private.
Yes.
So, but
Yes.
it was
Private,
so good.
but
Yeah.
very
It was so
good, very funny. Yeah, talking just about the love languages.
Yeah, a little bit about love lives. But, I'm sorry, folks. I am super private about my love life, and I have reasons to be. I'm also quite protective of it. So, yeah, I'm quite protective of it for all kinds of different reasons. But yeah, that's what we ended up talking about a little bit after.
Yeah, after the show. And I always keep thinking we have to have a post-show show.
I know,
right? Because that's where all the goodies are.
I know, it's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny some of the stuff that we talk about, but it's so cool. I think one of my favorite things I gotta say, Liz, about doing this podcast these past couple of years has been the people that we've met. We have met some absolutely stellar people who we would not have met at all were we not doing this. And I have been so excited, not just to learn from them because they're experts in their field, but there's just so amazing people. It was just awesome.
Oh, I agree 100%. And that's my favorite part as well. And Tammy Sollenberger, she is one of these people that we just had such an incredible conversation with. Excellent chemistry, I think.
And I think that that's always cool when we find somebody that we have pretty excellent chemistry with as well, as will be evidenced in our 100th episode, which is coming up, right? We have recorded, but it's coming up. But I love that we get to meet people that we wouldn't have met otherwise, just by the simple fact of doing this show.
Right, absolutely. And so Tammy, I've been trying to get her on the show for a while. I'm a fan of hers. She has an excellent podcast called The One Inside. She's an IFS therapist, and that's short for Internal Family Systems. She has a book out by the same name, The One Inside. And so we just have, a great chat. I can't wait for you guys to hear all about it. She talks about merging IFS and the Enneagram and what both are. The Enneagram is something that's a bit more like a personality test. That's why you said the achiever. I'm a number 3, but I have another number that's kind of close by. I wish you would have done it. We'll have to.
I know, we'll touch base with Tammy again. And when I do mine, I just have been completely in a weird headspace because I am working on this investigation, this HR investigation. And those are always very fun and interesting. Also not fun and interesting because when they fall into the realm of sexual harassment, it really just raises some ugly stuff. And it's a bit triggering, or Tammy, what did Tammy call it? Trailheads? Yeah. Trailheads, the stuff that's happening when the things that people do at work. But anyway, that's not what our episode is about. But
that's not what the episode's about, but some trailheads there. Tammy explains more about what those are. Excellent. So let's bring her on. Tammy Sollenberger. Tammy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be with you.
Yeah. Welcome, so Tammy. I have been a fan, and Lisa knows this, a fan of yours for a while. I love your podcast, The One Inside. I know you've written a book. I've yet to read it. Right. So we're going to talk about that. And so finally you're on the show. So I'm so happy. Really, I am.
I was super excited when you messaged me because I was like, I just love the name of your podcast. And so I had parts of me that were like, do I get to be that kind of girl? I'm just am I included in that club? And I just got really excited about it. Yeah. I'm like, I want to be, that's what I want to be.
Everybody's in the club. Everybody's in the club if you want to be in the club.
Yeah. No, that's great. Great. So, but you do something really unique. So you're an IFS therapist, and you're also an expert in the Enneagram, and you do a blend of the two. Is that right?
Well, I would use expert very, very, very lightly. So I would say I'm an expert in IFS. I mean, if I could say that, part of me says you can't say that, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyways. I'm an expert in IFS. I'm not an expert in the Enneagram. So I partner with Joan Ryan, who is an expert in the Enneagram and was trained with the big experts. And so she's an expert. And so what Joan and I do together is we bring in IFS and the Enneagram and have conversations about how they work together and how they help each other. And what I say, and I'm totally biased in this, is that IFS doesn't need the Enneagram, but the Enneagram needs IFS.
Great.
IFS can stand alone as a healing model and as a way we look at personality and the way we actually see the world and we see how we're made as a person. Like it changes the way we see personality. And the Enneagram is a fun, amazing tool that can inform us on our personality.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that because we know what IFS is. Liz is also a practitioner of IFS, so we've heard a bit about it and understand what that is. Tell us a little bit more in detail what the Enneagram is.
Okay, so the Enneagram is, it's, I hate to say it this way, but it's like a personality.
It is a personality test.
Yeah, I know. Another part of me is like, oh, I don't want to say it that way. It's not a personality test, but it's kind of a personality test. But it has, so there's 9 types on the Enneagram, and the thing that's unique. So everyone is a different type. So I'm a type 3. Type 3 is an achiever. This is not super surprising. Achiever, successful, busy. I have a huge to-do list. I love telling you all the. Oh, let me tell you all the things I did today. Like it's just obnoxious. So there's a 3. And then you have, so everyone has a different type, type 1 to 9, and all the types have different qualities that make up their type. And then we have what's called wings. And so if I'm a 3, then the wings are the numbers beside me. So you can have a wing. So I can have a wing 2 or a wing 4. And then you have a connected point. So a connected point for 3 would be a 6 or a 9. So the thing that makes it a little bit different is even though someone might be a 3, we're going to look differently because we have different spices. Sort of the spice of the wings are going to be a little bit different. And then how much of the connected points we pull in is going to be different. So it's not like the Myers-Briggs where you're like, oh, I'm an NFJ or whatever that is, whatever that is. I don't even know that. But like, so even if then you kind of really looks the same. So the Enneagram, there's also this idea of, so we're all going to look a little bit different. And then the other thing about the Enneagram is there's ways of growing as a person with the Enneagram. It's not like static. It's not like a static thing. Like, here's my personality. Like I'm a lion or I'm a this, or it's not like that. It's very much like, how do I say, well, now this is where IFS comes in. How do I soften those parts of me that are just very busy or very, success driven? And often what's underneath of that in IFS languages, those are protector parts of us, right? My protectors are busy and going and doing and doing and doing. And what's underneath of that is a younger exile, if you know that language, and younger exile in me that wants to be seen and feels unloved and unworthy. So the more unloved and unworthy that younger part of me is, the more my 3 type or those protectors that make up my 3 type are more intense.
Let me see if I understand that. Yeah. So let me see if I just kind of let me translate that a little bit for myself. So if my type, and I'm just realizing we probably should have done the test before.
I did the test last night.
Oh, well, Liz did the test. I didn't get a chance to do it. So if my type is a 3, which is I think a helper type, I think is what it
performer.
So the achiever,
3 as well.
A 2's the helper. So 2's the helper.
So the type 3 is the achiever.
Yeah.
So if you're an achiever, right? It's if you that on the Enneagram, right? Understanding that you have two types that sit next to it, which kind of spice it up in something that's connected. But the part of you that's exiled, using IFS terminology, amplifies your achiever type in Enneagram. Got it. Understood.
Exactly. And if you're a helper, which is a type 2, your exile, which is sort of underneath, sort of in IFS language, we kind of say those little exiles, those younger parts of us, or our inner children. We don't really say that in IFS world, but in other worlds, they say that sort of your inner child. Those parts are sort of in the basement. And so that kind of feeds, depending on how intense or wounded that those parts are, that would feed your helper. So almost imagine, your helper part, and there's a lot of women that probably listen to your podcast, and there's a lot of women that identify as a 2. And that is more, I think, because of society pressure.
Yeah. There's
a lot of reasons why women identify as a 2. And so the more we're helping everybody, we don't take care of ourselves. That's the typical woman. I hate to say this, but that is, you see so many women in a 2. And the more the intense helper is, the more intense the wounding is underneath that. The more a part feels unseen or unloved, just like I said, sort of unseen, unloved, or not cared for. So I'm going to help everybody else, and then maybe they'll help me. And it doesn't work that way, right? Like so if you're a helper and you're helping everybody else, and you're making everybody dinner, and you're bringing covered dish, and then you don't feel well, and no one's bringing you a covered dish, and it's not because they don't love you, it's because that's not their type. And that's the other thing that I love about the Enneagram is, and this is, I think, IFS has changed my world, and the Enneagram's changed my world in this way, is that would hurt my feelings. Where is my covered dish? Right? But it's because they're not a type 2. Right? Like, so if they're not a type 2, they're not thinking about bringing me a covered dish. That doesn't mean that they don't love me. They're a different type with different motivations, different protector parts, different energies, different ways of seeing the world. And I think that's been a huge change for me is, so Joan and I say, it's like we're all in the same movie theater, but we're watching a different movie.
Right.
And I assume you're watching the same movie as me. Right. I bring you a covered dish, you bring me a covered dish. We're not watching the same movie.
Yeah, that's really helpful, right? We're not watching the same movie. And that way, we don't have those expectations. We understand we're all different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that very fascinating as well. I mean, I know we're talking about Enneagram and I haven't done it yet, but it'll be like, take me 2 seconds to do it. And I'm actually surprised I haven't done it, because I thought I had, because I've done it.
I thought you had done it before.
I've done all of them.
Because we did have somebody come on and talk about the Enneagram about a year or so ago.
We actually didn't, but cut this part. Yeah, we didn't. She was
edit this out.
Yeah, edit this out. Yeah. No, she is Susan Drum. She knew about it. She might have mentioned it, but we didn't end up talking
about it.
All right. Yeah. But yeah, so back into the show. So I thought, I'm surprised I haven't taken it, because I've taken all of them. But what I find is interesting about any of these personality test things is really when you do it with another person. And I mean, it's everything that I've ever seen is like, you do it with another person, somebody that you're interested in knowing their type, that just understanding that difference exists. That's the thing I like about them, that, okay, difference exists. You and I are not the same. And that to me opens up a lot of like healthy places to coexist, because now you understand, even if you're labeling and you're having to label it to do that understanding. So, okay, I'm a 2 and you're a 3. Okay, I get it. So she's not gonna, bring me a covered dish because that's what I expect, and she won't do that. She's an achiever. So this is probably how it would show up. And I think that in and of itself alone, I always tell people, go take something. There's so many that I recommend to people. Go take something, because when you recognize yourself and you recognize somebody else, it opens the door to a lot of different relations. And we mostly do it at work, honestly, because work is where we start to see these things. But I like this idea of just doing it in your personal life.
Absolutely. I had my husband come in and I'm like, is that all these plans? Is that? He's like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm like, really? I didn't think, he's like, yep, that's you.
Yeah.
Surprisingly accurate.
Yeah. So, well, and I completely agree about relationships, right? It's really helped. I think in dating relationships, there's sort of this joking about like, okay, well, what's your attachment style? And I'm like, yeah. And what's your Enneagram type? Because if we're dating, then I need to know your Enneagram type, because that's going to really help me understand what's going on with you, what movie you're watching, because I can help you understand what movie I'm watching, and then I can understand what movie you're watching. So then, right, expectations are different. My feelings, my parts of me, to use IFS terms, parts of me aren't as then hurt or wounded if expectations are different or not met, because my partner is an Enneagram 6, which is different than me. And so he sees the world different than I do. He sees that he's watching a different movie.
Right. Yeah, no, I like it a lot. And then I like this idea of seeding. So how do you then sort of bring in the IFS piece of it? Because we've got that exile, right? Like we're talking about the exile. And we understand that those two things amplify each other, like on the one scale over here and the one scale over there. But then I know we've got protectors in some other parts, and you can kind of tell us how they work and how you see them kind of sitting on top of the Enneagram as you know it.
Sure. Right. Okay. So there's two different types of parts. There's protective parts and there's parts that need protecting. So we wouldn't have protector parts if we didn't have parts that need protecting.
Of course.
And so in IFS, we call protector parts. We have two types of protector parts. We call them managers and firefighters. Those are the two types of protective parts. And then we have the parts who need protecting, and that's called the exile. And so basically what happens is the manager works really hard to make sure the exile is never triggered. But when the exile gets triggered, the firefighter comes in to calm down the exile. So it's really the manager and firefighter is really just about the timing of the exile. The manager is before the exile. If the exile gets triggered, the firefighter comes in to help. And so what we actually start with the Enneagram, when you know your type, is your type is really your protectors. Like, so if I was to say, okay, I'm a type 3, and I listed out all the sort of symptoms or traits of a 3, I really can see those are my protective parts. The parts that are busy, the parts that are achieving, the parts that are successful, the part that says, oh, let me tell you all the stuff I did today. All of those are my parts, are protective parts of me. So that's the thing that I think is the very obvious thing, where the exile isn't necessarily the obvious thing. It's really the type. So does that make sense? So the types, if you identify your type, then you're really identifying the parts of you that are protecting you.
Yeah. So
that's clear.
Okay. That's clear. And I actually, while you were talking, I was like, okay, let me run really quickly and look at what the types are, right? Because I think it might help to sort of like run them down. Because as you were saying that, it was like, yep, looking at these types, that makes sense, right? And without even just looking at the type names, without going one level deeper to look at what the personality traits are. But you've got type 1, the perfectionist, type 2, the giver, type 3, the achiever, type 4, the individualist, type 5, the investigator, type 6, the skeptic. Sounds like somebody, but type 7, the enthusiast, type 8, the challenger, and type 9, the peacemaker. And again, I don't know which one I am. I could pick
what would you guess?
I would pick 3 of those right off the bat. Certainly the perfectionist, certainly the skeptic, certainly maybe the achiever, maybe the individualist. I don't know. So it'll be fun to
tie between two of them.
What happens that's where you get your connected points too. So a 3, if you look at the Enneagram diagram, right? There's sort of all of these arrows and lines going around. It
looks like a many pointed star kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And that's because we have these connected points. And so it's almost like a cocktail of like, so I'm a type 3 with the wings of 2 and 4. And those are sort of my spices. And then my connected points are a 9. So I'm doing my hand is going across, like I'm making a line. So a 3 to a 9, then a 3 to a 6. And so you're going to have elements or traits of, so I have elements and traits of a 2, a 4, a 6, a 9, and a 3.
Right. Well, because personality is complex. We are not just this one type of person. I mean, and that even kind of came in a little bit of Liz, when we talked about the astrology stuff as well, where it's just sort of like, yeah, it's not like personality is fixed to a certain point, but it's deep and complex and mired and impacted by so many different things, right? So that makes sense to me, what you're saying there, Tammy.
Yeah. And it lines up with IFS, right? Because we're multiple, we are parts, we are not one. And so I have parts that are very achieving. And then I go to 9, which 9 can be a little more slothy, a little more lazy. And I'm like, I'm kind of all or nothing, right? I'm busy, 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 or I'm watching Love is Blind on Netflix.
Yeah. Girl, me too.
Love that show.
Me too, honey. Me too.
So those are my parts though, right? Those are my parts. My parts are sort of like busy, busy, busy. And then these other parts come in, my 9 parts that are like, we're done. We're done. We are not doing anything else anymore. And so that's, and I think that's it is, and I think that's what I mean by a kind of a theory of personality. Both of these models, the IFS model and the Enneagram model, are saying the same thing, that we are multiple. We're not just one, we're multiple.
Yeah. Right. There's elements to how we sort of who we are and what we bring to the table. And I think that that's cool because, again, going back to relationships, if you do it with a partner or somebody you love or somebody you're in a relationship with, you get to understand that they are complex as well, because often we can't see ourselves that way, but we can see other people. So when we see the complexity of another person, you're kind of like, oh, okay, right? And it just makes it a lot easier to kind of move that forward.
Right. And, that's what completely drew me into IFS is that piece, and then also for myself, but as you say, Lisa, other people just knowing, okay, well, that's just a part of them. They're not an angry person or they're not a whatever person.
Right.
That's just a part of them. And that's super helpful. So,
go ahead, Liz, you have a question. No, go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, I was just gonna.
This is what happens when there's two hosts.
We're gonna cut that.
You probably don't run into this, right, Tammy? Okay, I want to ask you. No, I want to ask.
Go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead. Okay, am I going or you go?
All right. So getting back to IFS. So can you explain a little bit more about the protector? So, we have the managers, as you say, the firefighters and the exiles. So can you run down maybe some of the manager qualities and what that looks like?
Sure. Right. So I can speak for myself. So manager qualities are the ways, think of just sort of the way you manage your life, right? The managers are the ones that are like, okay, in order for me to kind of keep my emotions at bay or sort of to keep those exiles down, then my life needs to be structured a certain way. Just things about sort of the things that you do to manage your life. I mean, it's that kind of simple. The things that kind of you manage. I'm just going to use the word manage a million times and hopefully that explains it.
It manages. I mean, what? Y'all know what manage means.
It could be like a perfectionist is a great example of a manager, right?
No, so that's the one I was thinking about. I was like, and just the way that they sit together in both Enneagram and in IFS, it's sort of like, that's the one I'm thinking about, because perfectionism, when I think about it in a very, very real way, because I am a perfectionist to like the nth degree, it's disgusting, actually.
Like, part of you thinks it's disgusting.
I know. I was about to say
that's such a negative word.
Part of you thinks that's disgusting.
Such a negative word.
Well, the other thing, so perfectionist is a great manager, but a critic can be a manager or a firefighter. So a critic could be there to say, all right, make sure you don't eat those brownies because you're going to gain weight. Make sure you exercise, or like, it might not be a make sure, but like, it could be calling you names. It could be like, you need to be, a critic could be part of the perfectionism too, right? So you need to be perfect. Otherwise you're going to fail. And then if you fail, then right. So sort of a critic could be a manager that's really, this is the other thing we say about IFS is they're all helpful, right? So even the perfectionism parts of you, it's not going to be one, there's going to be probably many perfectionist parts of you. There's a lot of achieving parts of me. There's not just one, there's a lot of critical parts of us. And so those critical parts have good intention, right? If I keep telling you that you're a piece of crap, then maybe you will do that business plan that you're supposed to do. Like maybe if I tell you that like, you suck and you need to do better, then you actually will follow through on that list of things that you need to do. And so then what happens then is they have this positive intention. And so there's the critic's the manager. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Critic's the manager. But then the critic can be a firefighter, because when I do fail, which I'm putting in quotes, I have a part of me that fails. And then my exile comes up that says I'm not allowed to ever make any mistakes. So I feel all this shame. Shame is exile energy, right? All the shame. I am bad. So when I fail, I am bad. Then my critic comes in to say, of course you're bad. You suck. Why would you think that you could accomplish that thing? Because you suck anyway. So, you might as well go eat all the brownies because you suck. So the critic is going to come in after, and that's the firefighter. And it's really about whether it's before or after. So critic's a great example of firefighters.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I've never really heard it said quite that way before. I like that it's both, and those examples. And what about anger? What is that? Where does that lie?
It could be an angry part. Well, first of all, anger is a feeling, right? So anger could be, you could have parts that are happy, you could have parts that are sad. So anger could be a part. And, I would be more curious about sort of like, okay, well, what is the anger? Like, how is that showing up in your body? Let's find out what it's saying to you. What is it telling you about you? What is it saying to you sort of about other people? Like, I get a little bit more curious about anger. And anger could also be the part of you that's holding the anger, could be a manager or firefighter, just depending on, like, if I stay angry and that's a way that protects me from feeling, or if it's sort of if I stay angry and that's a way to protect me from being vulnerable, then that's a manager. Or if I get shamed, or if there's sort of shame comes up in me and that gets triggered, and then the anger comes in because it calms down my shame, then that's going to be a firefighter.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
it does.
100%.
It does. So I'd like to go talk a little bit more about the mix. Like, what are other things that's important for us to know about both of these kind of traveling together?
Well, let's see. I think the thing that feels important for me to say right now is we're not talking about, this is not going to answer your question. Let me just say that.
Great.
What we're not talking about is we have this other thing in IFS, which is called our authentic self. And we're not talking about that. We're just talking about parts.
Right.
And so I think the thing that is true for both models is that we're not just our type, and we're not just protective parts, and we're not just parts that need protecting. We are who we are in the essence, who we are. Our essence is what we call, in IFS, we call the self. In my book, I called the authentic self. In Enneagram terms, I'm not sure what they call it. I think Joan will sometimes call it, I want to say essence, but I'm not sure that that's the right term. But there is this idea of we're not just our type. We're not just our parts. We are this other thing. And this other thing is not like who we're trying to be all the time, but who I don't even want to say that's the goal. Like, it's not the goal necessarily.
Yeah, I was going to use that word. Like, I was going to ask you, is that some sort of like the high ideal, like the pinnacle in a sense? But, I also say growth is a mountain with no top. So there's no pinnacle ever really. Right.
So in IFS, sometimes they say that kind of self energy or authentic self doesn't really have an agenda.
Right. Well, so Dick will say, Dick is the founder of the model. He has changed that now to say self does have an agenda, and the agenda is for healing. The healing is the agenda of self. Right. And so, and what I'm thinking of about like sort of growth is self is there. Self isn't the goal. Self is already here. Right. Self is here right now. So self is here as I'm walking up that mountain, as my parts are walking up the mountain, trying to reach the goal, whether that's in business or in relationship or in my day-to-day life and a million things I'm trying to do that day. Like all of that, myself is right here already.
Right. So how do we access that?
Yeah. So what IFS says is how we access that is we unblend. We use this word called unblend. So I talk about this in my book, and I stole this from something because they talk about this in IFS. It's like self is actually the sun, and the sun is always there, and parts are clouds, or even types are clouds. And so as soon as we imagine unblending or sort of softening the clouds, or even imagine the clouds kind of dissipating a little bit, then self can shine through a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you said that. Yeah.
Well, and think about the Enneagram. As soon as you read your type and then you're like, oh, that's my type, there's a little bit of unblending that happens right there, because you're like, oh, I'm not just the perfectionist, right? Like, I'm the one noticing that I have these perfectionist types. I'm not just the achiever. I'm the one going, oh, I'm noticing that I have these achieving types or qualities or parts of me. Like, I'm the one. I almost imagine sort of like holding myself back a little bit, right? Like, I'm the sun noticing these clouds. There's nothing wrong with the clouds, right? The clouds are there. Sometimes the clouds are nice, right? But sort of I'm the one then noticing the clouds or the type or the parts.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense totally. So again, it goes back to this thought and idea that I have of like the complexity of who we are as people, right? And that it requires something, whatever that thing is, to tap into, to help us to understand the complexity of ourselves, which is why I like these personality tests and anything. So I said back in our astrology episodes, where I just talked about the idea of, listen, whatever gets you there, right? Because we all, whatever gets you in. So if it's MBTI, great. If it's the colors test, great. Whatever gets you in that allows you to kind of open up, or like you said, have the clouds part a little bit, is what I'm all about. So that is why I've taken every personality test there is.
And I love that, because I think the thing is we're saying that we're using the same language. And if I have IFS as my base, which I do, then those tests give me, myself, an understanding of how my parts operate in the world. So whether it's colors, animals, a type, a number, whatever it is, I am like, oh, here's how my protective parts have learned and show up and operate in the world. And so I can really see, here's the other thing that I think is amazing. I am not my color. I am not the animal. I am not a 3. Like, that's not who I am. That's how I show up in the world. That's how I show up in my relationships. That's something. Does that make sense? And so there's
sort of is not who I am. It's how I show up.
Yes, how I'm seen. Yep.
That's great.
And those are my parts, right? Those are how my part. It's separating out me from my parts.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you talk about these parts, how do they start, and what happens in that process?
Well, I think that Dick says we're born multiple, that we're born with multiplicity. And what happens is our parts become burdened. So they just become burdened with either like just childhood, right? Like, even if we're not abused, or even if there isn't trauma there, parts become burdened with the idea of, I smile and my mom smiles back. Then I learn that, if I smile, then I get a smile back. And then that can become a little bit, depending on sort of how childhood goes, maybe mom is sad a lot. And then I learned that when I smile and I'm a good girl, then mom's happy. And then my parts become burdened with this belief that, oh, if I'm happy and I'm a nice girl, then people will love me, right? And that can happen so easily and without any malice. I mean, I do that to my kid, right? Easily. There's no malice there. There's no bad intent. But I'm like, oh, he's in a good mood. I'm in a good mood. I'm sad. He makes a joke. Now I'm happy. So he might learn, right? So then a part of him can become burdened. Oh, I make a joke. I tell a joke. Then mom's happy. A part can then become burdened. Oh, if a friend of mine is upset, then I tell a joke, or you know what I mean? Like, so our parts can become burdened with these beliefs and feelings and messages that aren't necessarily true, or maybe don't work. That's the other thing, is sort of they work in childhood, but then maybe don't work in adulthood, right? So maybe, if I smile, if my mom smiles at me and I smile back and I learn to smile and be a good girl and be a nice girl. And then that makes mom approve of me and love me. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But then if I take that into my relationships as in work or in my relationships with my partner, then it's not necessarily going to work all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely.
That makes sense too. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, sorry, I don't know what my question is.
I love it. I love it so much.
Go ahead.
So these parts, right, that learn that they're become burdened, and then we use, say, the critic is there, the other managers are there, my controlling part is there. Do these hold younger kind of energy, or are they like, because it feels sometimes like the inner critic is big, kind of scary. So kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Well, let's use the example of the little girl that smiles, right? Because I think that's such a good sort of, a lot of us get that as sort of like, be the nice little girl. And so if I have a little girl that learned to smile, and be sort of like, be happy, be nice, sort of the messaging around like, be nice, be a nice girl, or sort of nice girls are loved, right? So sort of those are the messages around there. So I can have a part then stuck, like say I have sort of a 5-year-old stuck that has learned, when there's something really scary happening or something really stressful, then I'm smile and I'm a nice girl, then that keeps me safe. And so that 5-year-old then becomes stuck in my system with that message. And then I'm going to have other parts around her. I'm going to have a critic of her. I'm going to have parts that are maybe feel shame when I can't do that. So I'm going to have probably a lot of parts that react to her. And then I might even have manager parts then that manage my life to make sure that there's maybe never, ever, ever, ever any conflict. Because then if I never have any conflict, then I never have to I never have to get the smiling girl around, right? So the smiling girl never has to come up and has to feel that pressure to be smiley, because I'll never, ever, ever have any conflict. Does that make sense? And so we sort of have this 5-year-old that's kind of stuck there with lots of feelings and probably some shame around, if I can't smile, or if I can't manage or can't influence the people around me, or can't manage or influence their mood, then something's wrong with me. I've failed, or I've some shame. Does that make sense? And then there's all these managers that manage my life so that I never have to have that experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever run into any issues when you start talking about parts to other people that have no idea about IFS?
Yeah, I make it very simple. So I say, and I do not get pushback on this because it feels really natural to me, right? A part of me, so it's a Sunday afternoon right now, a part of me wants to lay on my couch and watch Love is Blind. And another part of me is like, it looks like the sun is out. You should go walk your dog.
Yeah. I mean, when Liz first brought that up, that's exactly what I said. I said, it feels very easy to access that simply because we speak in that way. Right? Yeah. Like we just naturally, without knowing anything about IFS, we naturally say, you know what, a part of me, it just comes up. A part of me just wants to, punch that girl in her face, or whatever it is, the thing that it is.
Yeah.
A part of me wants some ice cream. Like we say that. Or on the one hand, I want to blah, and on the other hand, I want to blah, right? So we tend to speak in that way anyway. So the idea of having these parts already sort of exists for us, even if it's subconscious in a way.
Yeah. And so what I'll say to people is the secret that we don't know is that there's you. So there's a part of me who wants to punch a girl in the face, because I love saying that, by the way. I'll punch someone in the face.
It's just fun to say.
My nice girl's like, oh my gosh, are we allowed to say that? Yes. So I'm going to punch somebody in the face. And then, there's another part that says, you're a nice girl, you're not allowed to say that. But there's also me. And I can look and sort of, I'm holding out my hands. I got one part in my right hand, one part in my left hand, and I am the head, and I'm sort of looking back and forth. And that's the difference. That's what IFS is bringing that feels different than maybe other models or other parts work systems is that I then can look at the part that wants to punch somebody in the face and find out and be curious. What's going on that you want to punch the girl in the face? Tell me about how you're feeling. What's the messages there? What's happening inside of you? I can be curious about that part. And then I can look at the other part in my other hand, the nice girl, and I could say, tell me about what's going on for you. Neither part is wrong. Neither part is right. And the more we call these parts polarized, the more I want to punch someone in the face, the more my nice girl gets triggered and say, we are not allowed to have any feelings ever. We're not allowed to have an opinion. We're not allowed to have anger. We need to be nice and smiley all the time. Right. And then the more I need to be nice and smiley and not have a friggin' opinion about anything, the more now I'm going to start saying friggin' and I'm going to want to punch everybody in the face. And the more those two parts get intense. And what happens, what we think is we think we only have those two parts. And then then there's disharmony and tension and we don't know what to do. Right. I've got this part that wants to punch everybody in the face and this part that says I need to be nice all the time. And harmony comes when self is there, when you are there and you can listen. Tell me about why you want to punch everybody in the face. Tell me why you want to be the nice girl. Are there younger parts there? Is there younger energy? How are you trying to protect me? How are you trying to help me? And then I can listen. And as I listen to those two parts, they soften. I see them. I hear them. And now this is sort of the family idea of IFS is then we can have a little bit more harmony in this little family with me and my punch the girl in the face and smiley part.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because the full name is Internal Family Systems, right? So like you said, the family. It's so interesting. We had Chris Burris on, I think it was maybe our third or fourth episode a couple of years back. So this is before I knew anything about IFS, but I'd met him. We were both working with some trial lawyers and we had him on, and Lisa and I, we were talking about the inner critic, which neither one of us really knew all that much about. And we had tried to record an episode on the inner critic, but we told Chris our inner critics wouldn't let us
release it. That was the joke.
We were going around in circles. So he started talking about it. And that's when I started, I think, training in it shortly thereafter, because I thought, this makes so much sense, right? And the way, Tammy, you just explained all this right now, it's so easy to understand. And it really does make sense. Don't you think so, Lisa? When you hear it spelled out like that?
Yeah. And that's kind of like the gist of what I got from Chris and like other people that we've talked to about this. But what I particularly like that Tammy just said was the idea of kind of taking it to the next step, like recognizing that the part that says, I want to punch a girl in the face, or the smiley part, and then getting curious about it. Because I think that that's the place that most people don't go, because we kind of sit in this area of like, well, that's just who I am. And that goes back to where you started, Tammy, which that's why Enneagram Needs Ifs, right? Because we sort of sometimes will take these personality tests and kind of go, well, that's it. This is who I am. I am set in stone. Yeah. Without really sort of doing the next thing, which is about trying to kind of dig past. I was having a very heated discussion with a gentleman the other day, and this person triggers me, and it's just like he triggers the out of me, right? So we're having quite a heated discussion, and it's a committee that we're on, and he said, well, I could just quit. And I found myself saying, no, I'm not going to ask anybody to quit. If you want to do something, you do something. What I find is anytime I'm in a space with someone who challenges me, that means there's something that I have got to do. There is work that I've got to do. There's something I got to figure out, because why are you like on my nerves? Like, why? Like, what is going on? Right? I haven't done the work yet. I probably will take my time, but it's the awareness. And I think that that's the first step, right? It's always the awareness. And that's where the personality tests come in. And then it's like, okay, now that you have the knowledge and the awareness, do something with it, which is what's going on. Ask the questions. Why? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And it's going to be hard to face the why sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, ask the questions. So I love that you brought that in.
Well, and I think that's a good example though, like this guy that triggers me, right? So this guy's triggering me. And but what we say in IFS is we want to do a U-turn, right? So if I'm, and we also say it's a trailhead, right? Like it's this person, instead of a trigger, we call it trailhead, right? If I'm going down this path, there's something here for me to learn. And so what's the learning for me? It's not about him, it's about me. And so I'm going to turn that around to myself and say, okay, what parts, let me be curious about the parts of me, what's happening in my body, what do I say to myself, what's running through my mind, what feelings am I having? Let me get curious about what happens when this guy says this thing. It's not about the guy, it's about my experience, my parts being activated, and can I use that as a trailhead to get to know my system? Because that's what I want to do. I want to get to know my system, because it's not about this guy. And if it shows up with that guy, it's going to show up with other people too. And so let me turn that viewfinder on myself and find out what's happening inside of me when this guy acts like that.
Yeah.
And maybe
maybe
there's some younger parts being triggered, right? If there's some younger parts being triggered, then I'm gonna have more energy. There's gonna be more upset. There's gonna be sometimes even like there could be something happening, like say with this guy, right? So say he's just like a jerk, like whatever, but you're like, it's not whatever, because there's something being triggered inside of me that maybe feels a little bit younger, maybe feels burdened, like maybe there's some burdened energy that is going to feel different in our system, versus if some guy triggers me because he's a jerk and I'm like, whatever, that's not I don't have a part up about that. Right. Like he's whatever. But if there's a part up in me about that, then I want to be curious about what's
going on there. Yeah. What's going on there. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And like I said, that's why I like that you brought in this idea of being curious about it. Like I'm using the scratching finger motion because that's how I visualize curiosity in this case. It's like, let's just pick at that a little bit. Like what's underneath? Like, it's like what's going on? Right.
I love that. But that's our critics often don't let us do that. Right. So what happens for me, I mean, this happened to me this morning, which about this part of me that's just like super consumed with something. And all I can feel are these critics that are like, you need to stop being so consumed by this. You need to like focus on something else, stop being so consumed. And then I can't get to know the part of me that's consumed, because the critic is getting between me, self, and the part who's consumed. So if I want to get some curiosity towards the part that's so consumed, I need to get my critic. And this is what Chris says, right? Chris says we got to work with those critics first, because I'm not going to get to know the part that's so consumed until I get my critic to step aside. So if I ask my critic with all the love and all the compassion, I get you're trying to help me, I get what you're trying to do here, let's have a little conversation, and then can you step aside and let me get to know the part that's all consumed? And often our critics just want to say, I just want to say blah, 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 blah. And I say, thank you. Can you leave the room? Can you go to the waiting room? And they're like, okay.
Critic is a mouthy broad, like, listen.
And often they just want you to hear. I just need to say, because blah, 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 blah. And you say, okay, I got it. Bye.
I got it. Bye. Go to the waiting room. Go do your thing. I'll check back with you later.
Exactly.
That is so funny. That's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great. So you have another question, Liz?
No, I was gonna start wrapping it up and talk about, what do you think, Lisa?
Yeah. That's I was gonna do the same thing. All right. So let's do that.
Unless Tammy, is there anything else you want to add?
I was just gonna mention
your book, and
this is great. Nope, you guys are doing great. It's really fun to talk to you.
All right, excellent. All right, so Tammy, as we wrap up here, what is the one big thing when we think about these two things, personality, Enneagram, IFS, or either or, what is the one big thing that you want our audience to take away?
I think I really want everyone to know that who they are is this authentic self. It's who they are. It's who they are right now. And so you aren't a type, you aren't your parts, you are a compassionate, curious, creative being, and that's who you really are. And when we bring that energy to our parts and our type, our lives can really be changed.
And if people want to do a quick like Enneagram test, where is there one that's free, or is there?
Yeah, I would just Google free Enneagram tests. And there's a couple different schools of Enneagram. So I just Google and see what comes up. I don't have a favorite one. And yeah, and then, but I would use those tests really lightly, use them as just learning about your parts. Yeah, an opening and a learning. And your first time you do a test, it might not be the right type, but do a test and then read through the descriptors and maybe even pick out different symptoms or traits that really feel like they belong to you. Joan Ryan, who I do the Enneagram and IFS stuff with, she has a set of cards that you can purchase. And I love these cards because they actually have instead of a test, they have you say like, what are I say the word efficient all the time. It's one of my favorite words because efficiency is a hallmark of a 3. And I had no idea.
Right. Yep.
And so she'll say, what are the words you use all the time? What are the phrases you use all the time? How would people describe you? And she starts these cards ask you these questions. And then it's just a really fun, interesting way of learning about yourself and your type and your parts by getting these cards. And then you can do them with your partner or your boyfriend or husband or girlfriend or whatever. Yeah. Or business, Fantastic. Right? Like you could get the cards and use them for your business too. So that's what I would recommend.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent.
And so you have a book. So just tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah. So my book is called The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. And it is I hope, simple, understandable way to begin to get to know your system. It's about, I talk about parts, and it's really a 30-day journey to just start turning that viewfinder inside to learn about your protective parts and your exiled parts and how your authentic self can get in relationship to those parts of you.
Yeah, I've heard outstanding things about your book. I'm going to get it myself. And also courses. You offer courses, correct?
Yeah, so Joan and I are doing an Enneagram and IFS course that's starting in a couple of weeks, depending. I'm not sure when this will be out, but it's starting in a couple of weeks. And then eventually I'm going to do a course around my book. I haven't figured that out yet, but there's a huge need for IFS. So it wouldn't be a training, but it would be, there's a huge need for IFS and just getting this information out there. So how I imagine that will go is people that are either waiting to get in a level 1 or a level 1 IFS training, or people that are just curious about the model. It will be, yeah. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but that's going to come. And then I would say by the end of this year, I will have that down.
Great. Excellent. And so where can people find you?
You can go to my website, tammysallenberger.com, and my podcast is there. Courses will be listed there. The book is there, but you can also get the book on Amazon or wherever you get books.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for being our badass of the week, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be my smiley girl, nice girl is so excited to be badass.
Awesome.
Awesome.